When it comes to world building, there are some mistakes that are quite obvious. Don't make cultures where everyone is the same, don't shape your mountain ranges like squares, and can we stop pretending that monarchies are a good thing? However, some mistakes are very difficult to spot and could be the difference between writing a good story and writing a great one. I made such a mistake when writing my first book, and had I recognized it while I was still world building, the Portal Mage Saga would have turned out much better in my opinion. Stick around until the end of the video and I'll tell you guys about my biggest world building mistake and how you can avoid it when writing your own stories. When I first started writing fantasy, I was pretty confident in my world building skills. I watched countless videos critiquing the world building of some of the most popular movies and book series out there. I did research on the time period I wanted to base my world on and made sure the technology matched up with it. I binge watched Artifexian's channel and spent countless hours making sure the geography of the world at least made some sense. At this point, I could write a paper on plate tectonics and probably get a solid B+. I wrote an extensive timeline of my world's history. I included every war, famine, myth, and the most significant events of the characters' lives before the story began. And the world building list goes on. But at this point, I'm getting embarrassed by how much time I spent world building instead of actually writing my book. Regardless of everything I did right, I couldn't help but feel like there was something really wrong with my world. No matter how much I sat down and thought about it, I just couldn't put my claw down on exactly what was holding back the quality of my story. I asked other authors to help me critique my world to see if maybe they could find it for me, but most of their critiques were very minor and only marginally improved upon the work I already did. Whatever was wrong ran far deeper than any geographic nitpick could reach, but no one seemed to be able to tell me exactly what the problem was. And so I went ahead and wrote 2 books in the world. Since then, I have dived a bit deeper into media analysis. And after rewatching some of my favorite shows of all time, it dawned on me. I learned exactly what was holding back my world. I had too much stuff in it. The series is called the Portal Mage Saga because it centers around Dawn, a portal mage, and the world's connected by portal magic. That's not all that's in the world. There are nearly a dozen different intelligent species, about 9 different magic systems, tons of fictional ethnicities, dragons, fairies, demons, and just about everything else you could find in a fantasy video game. With all of these crazy things popping up in the story, it is very difficult to build a world that seems unified within its narrative. If I were to just try and describe my world to someone in just a few sentences, I'm not so sure that I could do it without just saying it's a fantasy world. The reason I say this mistake is not as obvious is because so many popular stories get away with it, without anyone ever really noticing. It's totally possible to write a very compelling and fun story even if there is a ton of stuff cluttering your world. The Dungeons & Dragons novels, One Piece, and Lord of the Rings are perfect examples. Hell, to most fantasy fans, having tons of things in the world is actually a good thing. But having a big world full of stuff only works if you have a huge word count to pack it all into, like the Wheel of Time or the Stormlight Archive, or if you have thousands of chapters like One Piece or Naruto. But some of the most compelling stories, in my opinion, are written in worlds with relatively few concepts. They built their entire world around just a few fantasy or sci-fi elements and fleshed them out incredibly well. Examples of stories that do this masterfully are Attack on Titan, Death Note, and Full Metal Alchemist. The concepts of Titans, the Death Note, and alchemy shape the entire world these stories are based on, and the consequences of their existence are what drive much of the external plot forward. Now, there is a way to have a huge world filled with all kinds of concepts and magic systems and still tell incredible cohesive stories. Stephen King does this within his massive shared universe. The book itself is laser focused on 1 or 2 concepts that may or may not tie back to the magic system of the Dark Tower series. The Stand strictly focuses on the superflu and the end of the world that comes around after it. But if you zoom out to the multiverse as a whole, you will see a much bigger picture is formed, and the history of the villain is much broader than what is told to you in this one book. King can do this because he spreads this massive world across dozens of books. If he were to try and explain his entire multiverse and everything that was in it in only 1 or 2 or even 3 books, he would never have reached his level of acclaim. I think what causes this mistake to pop up, especially in the indie publishing community, is, well, video games, particularly RPGs and Dungeons & Dragons. These games tend to have a ton of things going on in them, with tons of races to choose from when customizing your character and interesting monsters to fight all over the place. I would argue overcrowding your world still makes for a lesser story overall. Like, take a look at Last of Us. It has one major concept and has probably one of the most compelling stories of all time. I think that authors will often be influenced by their love for these kinds of games and try to incorporate that into their books. To be completely honest, this was me. Much of the Portal Mage saga was inspired by a D&D campaign that I ran with my friends years ago. Because of that, the world and the world building became very crowded with all kinds of magic systems, races, and monsters. If I were to rewrite the Portal Mage saga from scratch, I would do things very differently. I would make it so there was only maybe a single magic system that was consistent across the entire series, rather than having several different magic systems from across the worlds. I would probably remove over half of the non-human races and center the entire story in one location per world they visit. All in all, the Portal Mage saga is still being written, and now that I understand how short it's going to be compared to much larger series like The Dresden Files, Wheel of Time, and The Witcher, I will be much more able to hone in on what the series is about and condense the story into something much more cohesive. If you want to avoid overcrowding your world with concepts, start by adding in a single fictional concept, whether it is the existence of monsters, the existence of a single magic system, or the introduction of a new technology. And then ask yourself this question: does this single concept provide enough story potential to write the story you want to tell? If so, then leave it at that. If not, add one more concept at a time until you feel that your series has everything that it needs, and nothing more. If there's one thing we've learned from Game of Thrones, is that sometimes it's better to have less than to have too much. If you still want to have a jam-packed Harry Potter-like world full of magic and fantasy, then go for it. I'm not going to tell you that having an overcrowded world is some sort of mistake on the level of splitting your rivers before they reach the ocean or creating a culture of pure evil. Fantasy authors have been doing this forever to great success. I would suggest, however, that you try to focus on 1 or 2 fantasy concepts per book. Since I'm already writing a series in a world that I would consider overcrowded, I have adopted this approach, and I believe it has improved the quality of my stories tenfold. But at the end of the day, I'm just a Dragon VTuber. If you're just writing for fun and not for a career, then do whatever the hell you want and put it on Wattpad. There are no rules here, only suggestions. Anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you have any questions or have any suggestions for a topic you want me to cover in the future, leave it in the comments below or message me on Instagram at LoreDragonPlays. Have a good one guys, and I will see you in the next video.